Hello, kia ora. Lucia here, property investment mentor and founder of the Finax Mortgages and Insurance. This is the recording of 1 hour live webinars. If you would like to join us in our next webinars and be part of the Q&A, please head to our website, luciaxiao.co.nz. I trust you will definitely learn a lot from this video. Thank you. Okay, so we're probably going to get started. So welcome to today's webinar, Unlock Your Financial Potential series. For those of you who had not met me before, my name is Lucia Xiao, and I am the property investment mentor, mortgage broker, and the founder of Finax Home Loans. And last year, I published my book, which is Financial Freedom in 5 Steps, 5 Years. A very good book, basically just my personal story of myself. I went from living in a state house and then later on built a $17 million property portfolio from 2012 to 2017. So if you're interested in the book, you can always email us and then we can actually just put in a career for you. Okay, so joining us today is Ben. And Ben is a property investor and also he is a transport expert. And he's really, his interest is always in the Auckland development, what's happening in Auckland. So today he's going to share with us the Auckland 10 years plan. And also he's going to tell us how can you actually tell, what kind of project is going to go ahead. And certainly that's going to actually help you when you're actually making a decision where you're going to buy or invest in Auckland. Yeah. All right. So let's welcome Ben Yu. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucia. And thanks everyone on the webinar. A brief introduction of myself. So I came to New Zealand in 2004 to study. And after graduation, I fall in love in this land, and who doesn't, right? So I've been living in New Zealand for the last 15 years. About 5 years ago, I actually joined Auckland Transport. I actually work in IT. This presentation obviously doesn't represent Auckland Transport. But back then, when I work at Auckland Transport, when I work in the Henderson office, I see some interesting changes that happened in Henderson that actually sparked me to did a lot of research around the government spending, the government investment, how it could shape an area and how that attract commercial and private money into an area. So this is a presentation about that. So I and also because of COVID-19, if you see the budget 2 days ago, there's a lot of money being announced, and there's a lot of more projects, the shovel-ready. Early this year, there's a New Zealand upgrade program. So how do you know which project are prioritized to actually go ahead? I think one of the most complaints people telling me or people ask me is it is really slow in New Zealand in general for infrastructure place to take place. I think it is, but I'll show you that what to look for in my presentation. So my presentation will be sort of divided into 3 parts. Really, the first part is why you need to take an interest to understand the government standing. The second part is how do you actually interpret some of the information that was in the media or in the government's announcement. The last thing is what information it is out there. So let me get started. So why we need to understand the council investment or the government investment in general. I came from China. So in China, if you do property investment, there's quite a famous economist that has a philosophy around looking at property investment. The way that he described it is, if in the short term you actually look for the monetary policy, and I think that's what you should talk to Lucia. In the medium term, you look at the land supply. In the long term, you actually look at the population growth. I think the population growth, you probably need to look at the immigration and some of the other information that's out there. But here I'm more focusing around the medium term, which is the land supply. And also specific to New Zealand environment is not only the land supply, but also the infrastructure. Because I think there's a talk around there's a shortage of land in New Zealand. I don't believe that. There's no shortage of land, there's shortage of infrastructure, because there's a lot of land out there that you can't actually build residential house because they don't have the stormwater, they don't have the sewage, they don't have the public transport, they don't have the parking and roading and all of that infrastructure associated with enabling building residential properties. So why we need to look at the investment? I'll give you from a property investment perspective. This is the old 10 years plan, which is done by the old Auckland City Council before the super city back then. This was the 10 years plan between 2009 and 2019. And I highlighted, right? So there's a key project that they're going to regenerate the Tamaki area, which is Glen Innes, Point England, and Panmure. And last year, CoreLogic published the top suburb for value growth since 2007. And you can see the top three are actually matching what's the Auckland City Council's 10 years plan. If you're not familiar with why Otaki Bay, I got a slides next, which basically is also in the Tamaki area. So you can see from the property value statistics and also the Auckland City Council's 10 years plan, there is a direct correlation between the government spending and also the median price in the area. I guess I'm not to say that I guarantee it will happen in the next 10 years, but it's interesting to see what a government spending can do in the area. So how many plans we have? So I think people are generally quite familiar with the unitary plan and the Auckland transport plan, because those are that directly affect our lives. The unitary plan is you probably want to take an interest around when you buy a property, that land can be subdivided or not, or the property you have any potential to divide. Auckland transport plan, obviously, you take an interest in that to see is it easier for me to get to where I want to go, and also for the tenant perspective, do they have available public transport to actually go where they want to go? Where I think people don't really pay a lot of attention is the Panuku Development Plan. Panuku Development Auckland is a council-owned organization that is very similar to Auckland Transport and Watercare. I'll explain that in the next couple of slides. And you also got the Housing New Zealand plan. I think the council just combined a few entities together to replace the Housing New Zealand. So the new one, I couldn't pronounce as a Maori name. So they combined Housing New Zealand, Kiwi Build, and also Homeland Communities into a new organization, which is looking after building social housing, building Kiwi Build properties, and also they now in the process of having the power to having the resources consent and building consent authority. Essentially, they be able to approve the resources consent for subdivision and also building consent for building a house. So you might want to pay some attention around what are the plans in that. So how I interpret it is, obviously, I have to put a disclaimer. So I'm not a financial advisor, nor I want to give you financial advice. I think just purely from the government spending and look at the history of how the government spending can affect the housing price, I can see is you should overlay your unitary plan, and then you should overlay the Panuku development plan, which I'll show in the next slide. And then the next one you look is the Auckland transport plan. As long as the area that Panuku want to regenerate has a better public transport that within 30 minutes, then the area will be ready for regeneration. And that has been shown in the past, where we can see New Lynn, when the area get the funding to get the rail upgrade, and then you can see the private and also the commercial money followed, and then the area is regenerated. You can see the old Mount Wellington, where Sylvia Park, they also having the same pattern. In the North Shore, you can see area that in Albany, where they have the town centers being built, transport link being built, and you can see the commercial investment from the Westfield and also from property developers building high density apartment in the area. Where you also need to, if you want to buy that into that suburb, most of the area that has the government money spent, Auckland, the Housing New Zealand will also want to spend the money to intensify their land. So you want to go to the website to make sure that you understand the Housing New Zealand plan, so that you don't really buy the property next door. So I think as a property investor, we all know that it's not a positive in terms of the property value. What is Panuku Development Auckland? So I think the description in their website is very interesting. So Panuku Development Auckland is the council-controlled organization that delivers urban regeneration in Auckland. We are here to radically improve your quality of living. I think the key word here is radically improve. I think that some of the work they have done, Wynyard Quarter in the city center, Tamaki area where Glen Innes, Point England, and also back in New Lynn. I think it does radically improve the quality of living in those areas. And therefore, I think people need to, people would like to actually, you probably as a property investor or even a home buyer, you probably want to understand where people want to see where Panuku Development Auckland want to regenerate the area next. Okay, so how the Panuku categorize the regeneration? They have 3 categories. They have the 30 years long-term regeneration that was in red. You can see we got 4, Wynyard Quarter, Tamaki, Onehunga, and Manuku. So you probably, if you're living in the area, you probably already experienced some of the changes in the area. You also got the blue ones, that's unlocked, where it's unlocked, it doesn't mean the council actually spending less money. It just means the council, the central government, even Housing New Zealand, are owning a significant amount of land in the area, so that they don't actually need to spend too much money to buy land in order to regenerate the area. They just need to make sure they have a better plan together in order to unlock all the potential in the area. The last category is support, where I think that the support is only a very limited area. I don't really pay too much attention in that. I don't see, it might be just a single site or a single project. They won't have the same effect as unlock and transform. So before I go to an example, of what I have experienced, right? So I just want to going back a little bit to give you a little bit history around New Lynn. I think I actually live in New Lynn for a couple of years where the regeneration happened. And when I first came to New Zealand, I think I also visited New Lynn back then before the regeneration happened. So there's quite of changes I, as even a migrant, to see in New Lynn. So the timeline is in 2006, the government announced that $120 million the rail upgrade in New Lynn. And it took about 4 years to complete. In about December 2010, the rail upgrade completed. You see the rail will be underground, and they build a new rail station on top of that. And after 3 years after that, the Lynn Mall announced $15 million upgrade. And I think the rest, if you've been into the area, you probably understand the changes. There's a housing development being announced in the area. I think that I can't remember how many years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there's a big flooding in New Lynn. I think they also highlight the infrastructure constraint. I think when they did the upgrade in the 2006 and 2010, they didn't anticipate the unitary plan. And after the big apartment being built, I can see there's a significant amount of constraint in that stormwater area. And that actually partially contribute to the flood. Don't quote me on that. That's sort of, I just see from a pure infrastructure perspective. Therefore, that because of that, you see the stormwater just wouldn't able to cope with the amount of intensification in Lynn. It took about another year after that flooding in order to get everything in order. So again, that's I just want to emphasize that when you buy a like an urban or even terrace apartment zone property, right? You need to understand that the council actually have an infrastructure upgrade in the area to actually support you to build apartment. If you don't, then if the council doesn't have that plan, then it's very unlikely you're going to build apartment, simply because I don't think the current infrastructure will be able to support everybody to build apartment in that intensified area. So that's actually the reason why Panuku actually choose some area to actually regenerate those areas, putting the right infrastructure into that place, therefore that you can actually build more intensified housing. So let's look at the next slide. So I just want to give a case study around what the current regeneration project that currently happening. So that actually sort of my true experience, right? So that's really just actually encourage or actually spark my interest in actually researching those areas. So when I moved to Henderson about 5 years ago, I also work in Henderson back then. So every day I travel around Henderson Valley Road. And about sort of probably between 18 months after I moved in Henderson, there's a lot of interesting things happen. So they actually built 2 more petrol stations in Henderson Valley Road, where they already have 2. Henderson Mall is sold into a new owner, and they are being a Chinese, there's a lot of Chinese restaurant opened, and there are also several commercial developments and retirement village is being planned. So I'm especially the 2 more gas station and also they actually build a really expensive restaurant in the area that I think that I don't see that fit into the area. It's not put it into a bad way, right? So I just personally think most people living in the area probably not be able to afford to go there to eat every day. But what So those are the restaurant I mentioned, the Wow Studio. So and that sort of opened in December 2016. And what happened after that is the mall is sold to a new owner in 2017. And that's the two new gas stations I mentioned. So that's what's before. So we only have Gauss, Henderson, and Mobile. And then we, within probably 18 months, they built two more. So that means there's probably one every 450 meters. That's quite interesting to see. I say why they're doing this. Straight after the mall is being sold, it's becoming quite clear, right? So the Auckland Council approved the high-level regeneration plan. And then I think, okay, I know why, because they actually know something I don't know, which is they probably already understand, or maybe being lobbying with the council to get the Henderson's regeneration plan approved. So what's that plan means? Straight after the plan, the Auckland Transport did a public consultation titled Henderson's Future. I think this is probably the first time a consultation done like this for suburb. And also you can see everybody's involved. And sometimes I joke around to see back then, after 7 years of Super City, all the Auckland City's organization can actually finally work together. It used to be, if they want to do something, Auckland Transport will do their own consultation. Panuku will do their own, Auckland Council will do their own, and the local board will do their own. Now, Henderson might be a really good example that it can show that they actually all works together to actually regenerate the area. And what the plan means? So the plan actually, highlighted in blue, is Panuku actually allocate $15.4 million to draft the Unlock Henderson plan. Personally, I'm not working in the area. I don't see why they need 15.4 million just for a plan. But given that I live in an area, I think as long as they invest their money in Henderson, that I think I'm all good with that. And you can see there's other funding and other projects around the area. Another thing that I mentioned is once the Panuku Development Auckland actually regenerate the area, working with Watercare and other agencies to putting the infrastructure. By that, I mean the stormwater, the wastewater, and other infrastructure to enable you to build apartment. The next thing is what is missing is the Auckland Transport, right? Then that's where the City Rail Link will come in place. What City Rail Link is actually going to put a full loop within the Auckland City. It will benefit the West Auckland the most. This is the map. We're in the Western Line at the moment. After Mount Eden, we actually need to go Grafton and Newmarket and then go to Britomart. Essentially, we need to go from west to almost central and go to the almost cross town to actually go to Britomart. After the City Rail Link, you can see the improvement because Mount Eden, then the next station will be on K Road, and then will be down Midtown. So it will reduce the time quite a lot. And you can see the Henderson area, which within the 30 to 40 minutes. You can see New Lynn back then is within that 40 minutes travel range. You can see there's a New Lynn is a really busy public transport station, I think before the COVID-19 hit. So I think another reason I think you need to pay attention to the area is the infrastructure project only a catalyst. What really important is, do they have the job infrastructure? Do they have people who actually can and want to work in the area? I think that's what Henderson, that was quite an interesting suburb as well, because they have a hospital, they have a stadium, they have the largest swimming pool in Auckland. They have 2 train stations, 1 potential light rail station. I'll explain that in a second why the light rail, you probably won't see the light rail in the near future. And they actually have more than 10 schools. You have other commercial company in the area. They all provide good job infrastructure in the area, especially the hospital. If you look at it, in the Auckland region, the hospital is a scarce resources. I think we only have 3 or 4 of them, right? So, and that provides some high income earners in those those areas. So I think that's a quite key thing in terms of jobs in Henderson. So what's next for Henderson? I think that this is the improvement in the park in Henderson. You can see that the WOW Studio opened before Auckland Council even announced the approval for regeneration the park. The park is just opposite of the WOW Studio. So you can see when WOW Studio actually choose the site, they actually did the research, at least in terms of what's the government plan in the area. There's also the Needle Living in that. I think there's a home living store that of 3 rugby field sites. I think if it's not for the COVID-19, they probably already opened. So I expect them to probably be open before Christmas. And if you actually go to Lincoln Road, you can probably see the construction site for the Ryman House retirement village, just next to the Waitakere Hospital. I think that from this is really just a Google Earth map around the area. So you can see the Lincoln Road. There's a lot of commercial spending in the area already. And you can see the within the West Wave and Pack and Save, the Pack and Save around the West Wave, they actually demolished the whole old store and they're actually going to build a new one. And the reason for that, I suspect, is because of the Henderson regeneration, they're going to expect a lot of population growth in the center of Henderson. Therefore, that they probably want to take advantage of that to build a new and better store to be able to serve the population growth better. And being a Chinese, I seen there's quite some decent Chinese restaurant open in Lincoln Road. Also a good sign that the people are taking interest in Henderson. So that's really just what happened, what I seen happen in Henderson. And if I actually look back to the Panuku Development Auckland map, you actually can see. You actually can go to all the unlock and long-term regeneration area, basically highlighted in red or blue. If you go there and ask people living there, they probably all going to tell you what changes that happened in the last 2 or 5 years. So take an interest in those areas. I can see that with the COVID-19, the government spending will be quite not only a key driver, but maybe the only driver in the next couple of years to actually regenerate, to restart our economy. So with that, that's I want to explain how you're going to interpret it if the planning and whether that project will go ahead. So what early this year, the government announced a New Zealand upgrade program. You can see there's different packages. And because of the COVID-19, the government also announced a shovel-ready project. Although in the budget, they haven't announced the detail of that project. The reason I want to bring this one up is infrastructure projects do take a long time from the planning before it can actually start construction. So you do really need to understand how you interpret it. So the way I interpret it, I'm not an expert, but I just saw sort of how I envision is you need to look at the funding. So if the money isn't secured within the next 3 years, you're going to put a big question mark in whether that project can start or not. Because as we all know, whether it's on the local government level or central government level, they have an election every 3 years. If the money isn't secured within their within the 3-year cycle, you have to put a big question mark. How are you going to see this? I'll give you an example. You probably won't see this. Essentially, if you actually Google the Auckland Regional Land Transfer Plan or following this URL, they have an appendix called Auckland Transport Capital Program. And I highlight this, which I'm going to show that in the next stage. Basically, they'll give you the project name, priority, and also, most importantly, the funding. So this is the Lincoln Road project. You can see the prioritization is 2. 1 means they're going to ring fence the budget. 2 means they are prioritized, but the budget won't be ring fenced. 3 means the budget is not allocated. You can look at the document on that. What I mean is when the budget is going to be secure in the next 3 years is when this is announced, you can see the majority of that budget is allocated within the next 3 years. So that means it is very likely the project will go ahead. And in fact, this project will go ahead. If you look at another example of PENLINK, so PENLINK is a very special like a project. PENLINK been in the 10-year plan for more than 20 years. You might want to laugh about this. How can a project be in the 10-year plan for more than 20 years? So every 3 years, they need to do a 10-year plan. So every 3 years, it is in the plan, but for whatever reason, the business case does not stack up. So if you look at it, the majority of the budget is allocated in the 2024, basically after 10 years. They only allocate a very small amount of budget to do the initial investigation, public consultation. So you can see that you're going to put a big question mark on this project comparing to the Lincoln Road project because the majority of the funding is not within that 3 years. And we all know every 3 years we're going to have an election, and that will have an impact on this. And from the funding perspective, you can also look for NZTA. So Auckland Transport doesn't have funding itself. They got the money from Auckland Council and the government. And the government's funding vehicle is through New Zealand Transport. If you actually go to their website, and you actually can see that the funding has been approved in 2017, they also indicate that this project will go ahead. Okay, I think that's just my presentation, and thanks for everyone to listen to my presentation. Hopefully it won't be bored presentation for you in the Saturday afternoon.
That
was quite interesting though, yeah. So I mean, apart, because you also mentioned about like, those development places like regeneration. So pretty much the regeneration one is the one that already going through and then they nearly completed their, what they're going to do. That's the area, right?
Yes, so maybe I'll share the Panuku development plan so that you can see it. So it got everything in there actually. So this is the Panuku Development Auckland website, and they used to have, so those are the area that they're going to regenerate. And if we go to Henderson, right, so they got all the plans in there. They got all the news. They summarize in their site, so you can look at the project plan. Where that's in Henderson, and you basically can just navigate around what's being planned in the area. Similarly, you can look at the news and blogs. That's where you can get all the information from.
Okay. And do you think this light rail at the domain now they've been talking about for years and years, yeah? And is that one likely not going ahead, or what's the story? Because it seems like Auckland Council kind of like just decided to leave it to the government to decide or something like that. What's your view on that?
I guess it's just really from the funding perspective. When they announced the light rail plan, the government haven't put the full funding for that to take place. They put some seed fund in order to do a public-private partnership. And I think that's probably, we don't do something like that in New Zealand very often. So they got a lot of process and probably paperwork to go through. That's the first thing. The second thing is Auckland Transport used to looking after the light rail, and after the new mayor Phil Goff, we actually given the project to NZTA, and we haven't heard anything from NZTA after that. There's no announcement. There's nothing. From my personal interpretation is New Zealand Transport Agency, they are traditionally only building road. They don't really have the right resources and skill set back then to actually taking on a public transport project. And they actually are roading sort of company. And actually, a lot of people who used to work for Auckland Transport get hired from NZTA back then. And because we all know there's a wharf scandal last year, and their CEO resigned, and there's a acting CEO. There's a lot of happening in there. That's probably also stopped the sort of, because they don't have the skill set, they don't have the right funding. They also don't have a stable environment, given they only have a acting CEO. So this all contribute together that the process is really slow.
Okay.
It's also disappointing to see that in the New Zealand upgrade program that the government announced early this year, and also the shovel ready project, we haven't heard of anything about light rail. I'm actually quite interested to see that it can take a place, but it's just not happening. And also, I think that from a property investor perspective, what I want to highlight is you really need to look at for the funding. You really need to look at for whether they got the money in the next 3 years for the project or not. Don't listen to people who say it will take place. I think our mayor told us the light rail will be to Moroskill, I think next year, but we all know that it won't happen. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, we got Ayako wants to speak, is it? I don't know how to do this, but we can actually. Oh no, I don't think I can bring you in. Okay, I think Ayako, are you able to just put in the chat box? Yeah. And also, because the other day I was listening to Philgo was talking about those projects, and I think they were talking about it, the city, the CRL, yeah, that's definitely going to they absolutely put a lot of resource and whatever, onto that project, and definitely they're going to complete that project. There's no doubt about it. And I think they're also like quite onto the Eastern corridor, the Eastern, from the Pamir or Botanies, that one. I think you would, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So the Eastern Pathway.
Yes.
So those ones are all the funding. Or if you look at the document I showed, the regional land transport plan, the funding are all secured. So they probably, I think for City Rail Link, their funding are also ring fenced. That means you can't use their money for something else. You can only use the money to build City Rail Link. So it's all just need to look at the funding, and that's whether they have the funding either ring fence or allocated, and also that funding is done there for the next 3 years. If not for the next 3 years, I think that you're going to put a big question mark.
Yeah. Do you have any others that you can share with us? Just like, because that one you show us the chart is quite interesting. Yeah. So is there any other that, you could actually quickly share with us, like, like other projects that, they already got the funding secured and those projects definitely going ahead? I think he also mentioned about Mount Roscoe or something. Mount Roscoe.
Not Mount Roscoe. So I think I'll show the Auckland Transport website. So those are all public. Those are all public information. I think people might just need to have some understanding in order to look for the right information. So if you look at the website, so if you look at the projects and roadworks, those are I would think those are actually prioritized, and you can see those are the program that actually look after by Auckland Transport, and you can see the Amity Eastern Busway is definitely a flagship project that been in the making probably for the last 10 or 15 years, and they finally be able to start on that. And I just want to highlight some of the other programs, the Airport to Botany Rapid Transit, Pohenui Station Interchange, and the Downtown Program. Those three projects, especially the element that contributed to linking the airport to city center, that's a key thing from the Auckland Council perspective to deliver for the American Cup next year and also for the APEC next year. So you can see why Key Street is a bit of mess before the COVID-19 from the roadwork perspective, and also the Pohenui Station. I think that the Pohenui Station is also interesting if you actually go look for it, right? So what that station interchange is actually going to provide a public transport link from city center to airport. So you can take the train to the Pohenui Station, and then you can take the bus 380 from the Pohenui Station to the airport. And only cost you, if you use your hop card, it only costs you less than $5, comparing to $20 if you're actually taking the Sky Bus. And I think from the Auckland Transport plan, it's actually 2 minutes faster than even the light rail is built to linking the airport to city center. So it's quite funny to see that, right? So we'll be able to do this, taking less money faster than a light rail. I think there might be a reason why light rail isn't take place, because the light rail, the business case back then is to link Auckland Airport to city center. But now we got a alternative solution for that for American Cup.
Okay, so looks like it's probably not going to go ahead then.
I wouldn't say so, right? So I don't think it will go ahead immediately. I mean, that means construction won't begin in the next 1 or 2 years. It will. I think that we need to see they be able to announce the initial plan around how the route and how they will work, and then we need to see the funding approved and allocated before we can say it will go ahead. So I wouldn't say it won't go ahead, but there will still need to have a lot of discussion and paperwork.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So is there any projects they're currently working on in the Central Auckland? Because we're quite focused on investing in the Central Auckland. Is there any project that that the funding's been secured? Either one or two.
I guess from the Auckland transport perspective, I think that probably just the Amity Eastern Busway, just Panmure station to the I guess to linking the east, and also also just in the town center. I don't think there's a significant amount of work in the central suburb. I think the majority of the work, at least before the American Cup, are also centered around the downtown, to make sure that we have the right infrastructure for the American Cup, and also linking airport to the CBD. I think there will be. I think after as the city rail link progress further, you're probably going to see some of the train stations getting modernized. I think Mount Eden will definitely get a lot of spending in the area because they need a new station, and there's probably other area, maybe in Avondale, I can't remember what's the other in Avondale, and that station might get modernized as well. So there's not.
Yep. Sorry.
I think Thomas is asking about North Shore.
North Shore.
So North Shore is. I'll just maybe go back to the Panuku's one. North Shore is, if you look at the NZTA website, I think there's a called Northern Corridor. That's just me. I think there's quite a bit of project around the North Shore. So North Shore already got the best public transport infrastructure at the moment in Auckland. And also through the Northern Corridor, I believe, called Corridor Improvement. Maybe I'll just talk. Maybe I'll send the link. So I'm going to just talk instead of showing. So if you look at the North Shore, so North Shore will have two regeneration areas. One is in Takapuna, one is in Northcote. If you look at the Northcote, you can already see that there's a lot of new social housing that in the town center. I believe the town center will also get regenerated. I think the most important thing is not only about look at the appearance of the town center. You need to really look at the value behind the regeneration, which is if you have money to buy a land that you want to build apartment, right, on the North Shore, if you're going to buy on Northcote, your design and also from approval perspective will be much easier to get approved because council will have a plan to putting all the right infrastructure in that place in order to have apartment, to have intensified housing in Northcote. if you buy, say, for example, in Glenfield, and you want to build apartment, your plan will be get less likely to get approved. I'm not saying it won't get approved. It just the government hasn't spent the money. That means you might need to spend the money to do all of that infrastructure. The cost might be high. So that's just from the really if you want to build something and from the land value perspective. People, I think the most question I ask the most when I talk about this is, when you talk about all the area that get a lot of government spending, that area is, how can I say, it's not the area I want to invest. It's the area that was probably in the low socioeconomic area. But for me, I guess how I can put it is this, right? If you can afford to invest in central or in the blue chip area, you should invest in the blue chip and central area. Where you maybe not be able to invest in those areas, and you want to invest into a upcoming area, the key thing to reduce your risk is actually invest along with the government, because that's everybody else doing. If you think about it, why New Lynn is becoming what New Lynn now is because the government spent $100 in New Lynn, Bunnings spent $100, Mega 10 spent $100, Lynn Moore spent $100, and all the small business and all the business in the area all spend $100, and New Lynn will becoming more prosperous in terms of the lives and in the area. However, that if you actually go to a non-blue chip, that means non-Auckland Central area, that you think that will be upcoming, but without the government spending, I guess that the government spending is the catalyst. The government spend the money in the area doesn't guarantee the area will get regenerated, but it's a catalyst. Without the government spend money, I would say sometimes if you look at Henderson now, without the government spending like millions dollars of money in the area, I can't see you'll become better by itself. If you have money, like Lucia probably mentioning in her seminars, you should invest in central. I think that's the majority of people are doing. If they have enough money, they will invest in the blue chip area. But if your budget is a bit constrained, or you want to do something more riskier, then that's where I think you need to look for, which is government policy and government spending, and invest with the government, and that's just reduce your risk and maximize your potential profit. That's just my personal philosophy.
I like your idea of talking about a Central Auckland's blue chip. So pretty much like, even you don't even do much study or research on something, pretty much you're buying there, you're just going to, the value is there, population is there. So I think that's where we, kind of heavily investing in the area. Yeah. And so, like, if you can't do it there, of course, there are other areas that you had to do a bit about more research. And then just for those upcoming, you had to understand what are the upcoming, like suburbs and things like that. Yeah. I think that's very good. Yeah. I don't know. Have we got any other questions? Yeah, because that's quite a fascinating thing, though. Yeah, because I know Ben is actually working for Auckland Transport, so obviously he's got some how to actually, because we saw those information out there, but we actually don't know how to read those one. So it's actually quite interesting to having someone to actually explain to us. Yeah. Also, this one is North Shore, so Auckland Northern corridor.
Yeah. So I'll put this link into the chat box. You can have a look. So this is what we call the Northern Corridor project, and I think if you look at the project overview, so this is essentially we want to have a ring. Basically, we want to have an alternative highway to linking the how can I say, the central and the North Shore. At the moment, the only way is through the Harbour Bridge. We got the motorway 18, but the motorway 18, there's no direct link between the motorway 18 to State Highway 1. So we need to actually linking the State Highway 18 and State Highway 1 without actually going off the motorway and on the motorway again. And this project is actually this will be part of the Auckland Northern corridor. It's also going to build I think it's going to build a new Northern Express bus station in Rosedale. They're going to extend the Northern busway from Constellation to Albany. They're also going to build some improvement in their area as well. Have a look at this. This project is something the funding already approved. You can see the project timeline, which means it isn't in the next 3 years. You can see that the budget's in there and the project status is in construction. So, so that's what's happening on North Shore. And I think the regeneration to Tapuna and Northcote will happen very shortly as well. Lucy, I think you asked me about what happened in the central. I think another project that was on the central area is probably in Avondale, between Avondale and New Lynn. They're going to, I think the local board is called Faux Local Board. I think you might have a previous speaker, Susan, who is is it called president or vice chairman for Faux Local Board. Yeah, so there's some regeneration plan in Avondale, which is quite fascinating as well. You might, if you're interested in the area, you can look at the Panuku Development Auckland. So I think Panuku Auckland just purchased a site for community centers in Avondale, and also the Faux Local Board is actually looking for a site to build a swimming pool in the next 10 years.
Thank you. Yeah. So what are the upcoming suburbs in Auckland?
Upcoming suburb? This is $1 million question.
We got a Henderson, we got a Avondale, we got a Northcote, which is you just covered, Yeah.
I think another one that I haven't spent a lot of time looking on is Onehunga. If you look at the one I showed you before, Onehunga is also in red, which means 30 years regeneration. So I think they just started their 30-year regeneration not very long ago. If you look at what the long-term regeneration does to Tamaki, you're going to see there's a lot of money and a lot of infrastructure being refreshed in the Onehunga area. That's the area that I haven't really spent a lot of time into gathering the information. Maybe I should.
I think we do find, because we have quite a lot of customers that are encouraging them to investing in Onehunga in the past couple of years. And what we found is the price in the area actually goes up a lot, just far too much. Very often you go to the auction and then the CV might be 1.1 and then they will sell for 1.45, which is just far too, it's kind of like a bit overpriced, when you kind of also look at it as well. But I think it's because they're quite a special location, it's a center, but also it's also, close to airports. So it's kind of like a quite an important part of the suburb.
Yes. So the City Rail Link, once completed, going to improve the frequency of the train services linking Onehunga and the city center a lot. At the moment, because the constraint in the Britomart is a dead end station, right? The train comes in and they have to come out from their way. Therefore, they reduce the frequency of the number of trains that we can run on the current track. Once the City Rail Link completed, you will see a higher number frequency that going through from Onehunga to Britomart. And you also, I think that if you think about it, if the light rail do go ahead, Onehunga will be becoming a major transport hub because they have the train station. They're also going to have a light rail station. So, and Onehunga is from where it's currently now, is actually have the motorway 20 and also, it has a motorway 20 goes through it. So it got good motorway access. If they have the train station, potentially a light rail station in the future, you can see that it's an area that was, and also it's in the central, and it's a major town center up for regeneration. You can see the amount of government spending will potentially go into there. And once those, we can see from what happened in New Lynn, what happened in Sylvia Park, what happened in Albany. Once the government finish their work, all the commercial and private money will follow, and you see the you have maybe a better what's the mall called there? I can't remember. I haven't go there for some time. They are you see there's a lot of
Is it?
Pardon?
Dressma.
Yeah, the Dressma. Yeah, you see the Dressma will probably going to get refreshed as well, because with all the government money. I think the with the transit-oriented development now, which what transit-oriented means is basically because government is focusing on for you to take public transport, so they're going to build everything around that public transport link. If you think about New Lynn, if you think about Albany, if you live in an apartment, I'm not saying you should buy an apartment, just think about the lifestyle. If you live in the apartment in New Lynn, you don't need a car. Everything just around maybe 5 or 10 minutes walk distance within where you live. And that's why the private money will follow, is because once the government got the infrastructure for the area to have more housing to be built in the area, the population will grow. Therefore, that people will build more restaurants. People will build, will sort of refresh their mall to make it bigger, and that's already happened in sort of New Lynn, in Sylvia Park. Soon will be in Albany, because Westfield, I think last year, just announced some sort of expansion plan in Albany. Albany is quite an interesting area. I'm not quite sure the timing. Stop me, Lucy, stop me if you think that the time.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I think we cannot say an hour and a half. We've been running all the webinars an hour and a half, but I think, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, in the West, if you look at it, what quite interesting is I think I'm also, Lucy mentioned that you should only invest in Central. I think I spend the area a little bit, but I normally telling my friends or fellow investors, don't go to the Greenfield area, like West in like Hobsonville or Northwest. The reason for that is they don't have public transport. It's very expensive to build public transport. If you think about the amount of money the Auckland Council or the Auckland Council or the government spend on light rail, they're not going to easily getting that money spent to expand into a greenfield area. Even Auckland Council agree with me, and the reason for that is we all know, as part of the Henderson regeneration, Auckland Council sold their council building in Henderson. They need to choose a new site. They call it Northwest Hub. So you think about Northwest Hub, it make natural sense to choose a site in Westgate because it's called Northwest Shopping Center, and also it's an area that urgently needs some good employment in the area. However, instead of choosing Westgate as a site, Auckland Council chose Albany. The reason Auckland Council's the rationale behind the decision quote Auckland Council's sort of media release is Albany got a good public transport link between the Auckland Council's head office in CBD and the Northwest Hub, which is in Albany. And again, Westgate doesn't even have a transport hub yet. And I think the developers there, I think in New Zealand Herald, they're going to sue Auckland Council, Auckland Transport for some sort of dispute between them around how that transport hub is being built. But again, that's what I mean is the public transport link and the access to the public transport link going to be coming with the high density housing being built, I think going to be more important than you have a good access to motorway. That's just my thinking, because they're going to promote more transit oriented development. They call it TOT, means that will be very similar to the big cities like Sydney, Melbourne, or the cities in maybe in China, where everything will be around the transport link, and if a suburb that doesn't have a subway or a train station, the house price in long term will not going to see the high growth, and that's already seen in the area in Sydney. So in a way, we are in the early stage of having high density living, and I'm actually talking a lot with my friends in Sydney to actually learn how that actually shaped Sydney maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and I think that Auckland will head that way.
So are you actually suggesting like if we are actually investing along the railway, the train stations, that's probably not railway, should be like train station. That's probably the you're going to see like the value is going to be there. You know, it's probably the better choice. Is that what you are saying? Because obviously Albany doesn't have a train station now. Yeah.
I think in Auckland Transport we call that rapid transit, RTN. So I think that because of constraint in the harbour bridge, we couldn't build light rail or train. But the rapid transit concept, which at the moment is all the current train track plus Northern Express busway. So that's the rapid transit. Anything that along that rapid transit will be I guess from the public transport perspective, would be a very good site for you to consider, because those are the sites that you've seen that in the long term, they like to see either train or bus running through that rapid transit route every 5 or even every 2 minutes. So that's what I think that's what happened around the unitary plan and Auckland Transport Plan and the Panuku Development Plan change. Around the Auckland Transport Plan is, back then when I first came to New Zealand, we have probably 3 or 4, even 5 bus company, and they all competing. You buy a Stagecoach card, you can't use the other company. And also you can go to a bus stop within 5 minutes of walking distance, but you have to wait for an hour to get a bus. Instead of doing that, now the transport plan changed to utilize that called rapid transit. That means Auckland Transport draw a few sort of routes that they regard as a rapid transit. They're going to spend loads of money around that rapid transit to make it really fast, to make it really reliable, and to make the schedule to be every 2, 5, or 10 minutes, even in off-peak time. So that now you've seen what that shaped with the recent rollout or the bus schedule and bus route changes is, if you're not living within a rapid transit station, you're going to take a bus. they're going to take you to the rapid transit station, and then from there, then you can take a bus or train to go to city center. You might not having a direct bus access to city center if you don't live in the rapid transit route. I think there will be personally, I think that will be becoming more common in the future with all the sort of technology enabled transport solution to solve from your home to the rapid transit link. That's something that in the long term, again, from a property value perspective, right? If your property in the area that doesn't even have a direct bus transport or train transport to city, then your property value is not going to increase as much to the property in the suburb where they have a direct link, where they have a transport link to the city directly. Where if you live in, for example, in Long Bay, probably not a bad example, let's just not say Long Bay, in the area that you need to take a bus, then go to the Albany first before you can go to city. Then people will say, well, why I want to live in other area? I might just live in Albany where I can just jump on a bus and go to city directly. So
Okay, so pretty much the public transport is going to be the way. And I think you comment about there is no shortage of them. It's just like it's a density. So pretty much like looks like we just going for like a smaller houses and even apartments living. That's probably the future of the Auckland. Maybe not the next 10 years. It could be I don't know, in the next 30 years or something. Yeah. Yeah. And certainly looks like Central Auckland is still, like where the most safest places, like Ben was talking about blue chip, so you don't even need to do much study. You can just go in there investing if you can. Yeah. Otherwise, looking for those upcoming area. And I think he mentioned a couple of them, Henderson, Avondale, Newlyn, Northcote. Takapuna is quite expensive though, yeah. So probably not really good for investment type, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's probably is there any more questions from anybody? Oh, another thing that I'd like to comment is like a development contribution, because that's just like personal experience is like where the government put a lot of money into the infrastructure, they actually want to recover from the development contribution. So basically, if you are doing the development in that area, you found yourself actually had to pay quite a bit on the development contribution compared to other area that they are not putting a lot of funding into that area. So that's just another, like things, just be aware. Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the infrastructure, that's what's another interesting thing happening in the areas. If you look at the Auckland Council's land supply strategy, if you Google that, then they actually want to restrict because the unitary plan and they be able to develop a lot of the properties within the current urban boundary. They actually don't want to expand the urban boundary. The reason behind that, again, is the infrastructure cost. The new way is a public-private sort of partnership, and that is that's not even a public-private. It's more just the government doesn't want to pay anything, so the developer will cover the half of the cost, and the other half of the cost will be covered by people who live in there. So that's where the model they have for the Milldale that was on the North Shore, the Milldale development. If I just share the screen.
We could hear the background in Ben's little trial. I think they really want to participate.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll send you the link. So where the new infrastructure, especially for the Greenfield project, that was quite interesting. That the property developer will contribute half of the infrastructure cost. The other half of the cost normally will be covered by the council. Now with this new development area, that the other half will not be covered by the council, will be covered by people who live in there. So the council or the central government will give them a loan, interest-free loan for the next 30 years. If you buy a house in the area, you will pay more rate than anybody else. They're having the same value of the property. There will probably, I think there will be roughly around $1,000 more than maybe, for example, I think the Milldale, which is next to Millwater, right? So if you buy a similar house, then you basically will pay $1,000 more rate than people who purchase next door that doesn't have this arrangement. But I think that with all the greenfield, they're probably going to be becoming a norm. That's what Lucia mentioned as well, is if you want to develop in the greenfield, that's fine, but the council doesn't want to pay any infrastructure cost because that's just my interpretation. They already have enough project to regenerate the current urban existing town centers rather than to expand to outer area to create new town centers.
Okay.
Which website is the one can view the project in Auckland? I think that was the project, the Panuku development. So I think you can see the link. I'll send it again. Okay, I think that's probably going to be enough.
Yeah, have we got more questions? Yeah, I thought we're going to give you a minute or so. Yeah, just in case you're still typing. But I think it's quite interesting though, yeah.
It's not exciting as seeing property rises and doing actual property investment. Those could be a very boring read, but I think that
because it's quite a long-term project, yeah. So I mean, you talk about 10 years and 10 years, yeah, and so it's quite a long-term project, yeah. But it's always good to know that what's happening, and certainly there are places that like if you can invest in Central Auckland, you can. If it's not, there are other areas like Avondale or things like that, North Coast. There's places maybe you can actually looking into invest as well. Yeah, if you have a lower budget. Yeah, I think in that area you're probably looking at maybe somewhere in the 800 something or something, 800,000 something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite key to understand it and also understand the timeline. I don't think you can time that, but that's just something that was happened even in Henderson prior to COVID-19, probably early 2019 or late 2018. A full section property in Henderson will probably only sold around 900K, but I'm thinking between 800 square meters to 1,000 square meters. That will probably just around, definitely not more than $1 million. But just before the COVID-19, some of the property sold almost close to 1.5 million. Even I live in Henderson. Even I told a lot of people that Henderson's area that you can have a look. I didn't anticipate that people would pay that much price for a site. There's something that would just I guess a lot of the developer and a lot of people who look for subdivide are start to understanding the plan better, and probably working with council and people who in the know to actually see that those sites are actually more valuable than the site that doesn't have the council's investment.
Yes, yeah. It was, I think it was quite a lot of them was kind of double the CV or something. I think it was on the New Zealand Hero or something, yeah. Okay, so that's probably all from us. And, thank you very much for Ben joining us today. And thank you for everyone, you're still staying with us, so we're going to close this off. And if you have any, questions, you're much welcome to actually email us or something like that. And at some stage, we might actually get Ben to come back, because I know that he's really into the, the transport and how they're going to shape the Auckland, and of course the property investment. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy.
And see you next time. Yeah. Thank you, Ben.